Today we're going to be talking about one of the most common mistakes that I see with designing for non-designers. So what that means is you are designing some type of slide presentation, you are designing some type of white paper, some type of brochure, you're in Canva, it doesn't matter what you're doing. And you have an image and you want to take up the full screen, which is a great idea. Whenever you can take images and make them full scale and make them take up the entire page or the entire screen, it's going to look better than having a lot of tiny boxes. But oftentimes people don't know how to make that work and keep the aspect ratio. So that means that it looks like in real life, right? So right now, this is an image and you can see it doesn't take up the full screen. I want it to take up this whole space. And so a lot of times what I see is I see people just take the edges and just stretch them to the edge. And this is problematic because this isn't what carrots look like in real life. You may not notice with the carrots because it's not that big of a stretch and it's not that, carrots aren't always that uniform, but you will notice this with people. So if I take this person here and stretch her to the edges, you can see she starts to look just unrealistic. And if I were to do the same and squish her, you'd see that she starts to look very unrealistic and kind of alien-like. And the same goes for animals. If I take this cow and start stretching the cow, this is not what cows look like in real life. This doesn't look like what we know cows look like. And this is obviously a bit more extreme because we're dealing with a portrait image instead of a landscape image, but these are all problems. So what do you do? Well, there are two options. If you have something like this and you want it to just fill the whole screen, you can come up to the Design tab up here, go to Designer, and there's going to be an option to just full scale take that image and keep the aspect ratio so you're not stretching it, but you are filling the screen. What it's doing is it's cropping the image. So if I come over to the picture format and I click crop, you can see if I zoom out here that they've cropped it. This was the original part of the image that you could have seen, and they've just filled it with this whole image. So these black lines here are your frame, and then the white dots are the image. So I can move this up and down and I can kind of adjust this. If I decide that I actually want it to be cropped closer, I can click and drag on the corners. And if you click and drag on the corners, not the side and not the top or bottom, but if I click and drag on the corners, it'll maintain that aspect ratio. So then I can make the image take up whatever section I want while still cropping it to the full screen. You can do this without going to Designer. So the cow here, if I click on it, go to Picture Format, and go to Crop, I can just click on this. I don't have to click on the drop down. Then I would take the black line here, you see how it forms into a T, take that and just click it to the edge of the slide, and then do the same over to here. Now the frame is taking up the entire slide. And then what I would want to do is take the corners and click and drag these out till they get to the edges. And then I'd have to kind of adjust where the cow goes. Now this, you're not going to get that background cows with where this is cropping. So if you did want that, you'd have to choose a different image, or you'd have to choose not to make it full scale and do something more like this where it's kind of circular, or you'd have to crop it with its head kind of not fully there. So you're getting just a little bit of his ears. So you can kind of decide what that looks like. But whatever you do, please do not take the corners and or the edges and stretch them or squish them, or the top and stretch and squish. You want to use the corners no matter what you're doing. So going back to these carrots over here, if I didn't stretch and squish this, and I just use the corners to pull this up, I could also not even crop it, but just do this. Because when I actually display this in PowerPoint, I'm not going to see the edges that go off the screen. I'm only going to see what was on the slide. This can be a little bit confusing though, because when you look at it, you think that you're going to see this entire area. And so sometimes that leads you to add something that's actually going off the slide. So whenever possible, it's a better idea to crop it to the edge of the slide so you can see what's included or not. And you can see here you get that dotted red line, which is telling you it is in. Hope that helps. Reach out if you have any questions.